You've heard the term pretty much everywhere, right? In schools, in the office, all over social media. Growth mindset has totally blown up over the last decade, becoming one of the biggest ideas in education and, personal development. But here's the thing. As it got more popular, the real meaning kind of got lost along the way, simplified and sometimes just plain wrong. So today, we're going to dig in a little deeper. What did the original science actually say about all this? And, more importantly, what happens when a really powerful scientific idea smacks into the messy reality of the real world? As one educator, Stephen Hickman, put it, mindset is a really important piece of the learning puzzle, for sure, but it is not the whole picture. So, let's try to figure out exactly where this puzzle piece is supposed to fit. Okay, let's do this. We're going to wind the clock back to the very beginning, to the original 1988 paper by psychologists Carol Dweck and Ellen Leggett. This is where the whole idea really kicked off. The entire model, the whole thing, really rests on this one simple but super powerful idea. They called it implicit theories of intelligence. It's just a fancy way of saying we all have a deep down belief, one we might not even think about what intelligence actually is. So, is it something you're just born with, or is it something you can actually build? So, Dweck's research found that people pretty much fall into one of two camps. Some people have what's called an entity theory. They see intelligence as a fixed thing, like a treat you can't change. You get a certain amount and, well, that's that. But then there are others, the ones with an incremental theory, who believe intelligence is something you can shape, something malleable that you can grow with effort. Now, here's where it gets really, really interesting. These beliefs don't just stay in our heads. Oh no, they actively shape our motivations. They determine the kind of goals we chase after, especially when things get hard. Think about it like this. If you believe intelligence is fixed, that's the entity theory, you're probably going to chase what's called a performance goal. Your main objective? Look smart. Avoid looking dumb at all costs. It's all about proving how competent you are. But if you believe intelligence can grow, the incremental theory, you're way more likely to go for a learning goal. Your aim isn't to prove you're smart, it's to get smarter. It's about mastering new stuff. And this is where the rubber meets the road. When someone with a performance goal runs into a difficult problem, it feels like a threat. It can trigger all this negative stuff. They might start to think effort is useless, get defensive, feel anxious. But for someone with a learning goal, that same difficult problem looks like an opportunity. It triggers all these positive things. They keep believing in effort, they focus on the task, and they even get a kick out of the process itself. So at the end of the day, these two different paths lead to two totally distinct patterns of behavior. You have the helpless pattern, which comes from those performance goals, leading people to shy away from challenges and fold under pressure. And then you have the mastery-oriented pattern, driven by learning goals, which leads people to actually seek out challenges and show amazing persistence, even when they fail. So that's the science, a really clear, compelling model. But what happened when this idea left the quiet research lab and burst into the real world, especially into our schools? Let's get into that. It was met with just a huge amount of excitement. As educator Stephen Hickman put it, mindset theory really felt like a silver bullet. It suddenly gave teachers and parents a whole new way to talk about motivation and effort and success. It seemed like the perfect answer everyone was looking for. But here's the problem. As the idea got more and more popular, it got simplified. Posters started going up in classrooms, there was assemblies. Growth mindset became this buzzword that everyone used. But that deep psychological model that we just walked through, that often got left behind. And this gap, this disconnect between the theory and how it was actually being used, started to create some pretty serious problems. People in the trenches, like Stephen Hickman, started noticing these recurring issues that were actually undermining the whole idea. He actually identified 6 big ones, from people just not getting the definition right, to what he calls the poster problem, just paying lip service to the idea without really doing anything. Then there are issues with how you even measure mindset, huge conflicts with how schools were actually set up, and a bad habit of mixing up correlation with causation. But a few of these are so important, we really need to dig in. All right, let's talk about the biggest mistake, the one you see everywhere. So many people took growth mindset to mean just praise effort. But praising effort for effort's sake, especially when a student is getting nowhere, is completely useless. As Dweck herself has said over and over again, the praise has to be linked to the process, to the strategies a student is trying, and the progress they're actually making. If it's not, it's just empty words. And then there's this huge systemic problem. On one hand, we're telling kids to embrace the process, focus on learning, don't worry about getting it wrong. But on the other hand, the entire school system is pretty much built around target grades, class rankings, and high-stakes tests, all of which are fixed evaluations that basically scream performance goal. It's a massive contradiction. But the biggest danger, the most serious risk of all, is when mindset stops being a tool to empower students and instead becomes a way to blame them. When a student is struggling, it's just too easy for someone to say, oh, they just don't have the right mindset, and completely ignore the bigger picture. Things like inequality, a lack of resources, or maybe just bad teaching. Dr. Tim O'Brien just nails this risk perfectly. The language of mindset can become just another fancy-sounding label. So instead of helping a student who's struggling, it can be used to just write them off, turning a tool that was meant for understanding into a weapon for blame. So, wow. Given all of these problems, you might be thinking, should we just throw the whole idea out? Well, not so fast. The key really is to bring the powerful original theory back together with the messy reality of how it's been used. Because even with all the misinterpretations and all the issues, the growth mindset concept has given us something incredibly valuable. It's given us a shared language, an accessible way to talk about the very nature of learning, of effort and motivation, not just with our students, but with each other. So how do we put this puzzle piece back where it belongs? Well, first, we use that shared language to have real conversations about what it means to learn. Second, we make absolutely sure our feedback is about the process and the strategy, not just good effort. And third, and this is probably the most important one, we have to acknowledge that mindset is just one piece. We also have to look at all the other big systemic things that impact a student's ability to succeed. And that really leaves us with a final, crucial question. If we accept that mindset is a valuable but incomplete part of the solution, it forces us to ask, what are the other pieces of the learning puzzle, and how do we start putting all of them together?